Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to continue our way through our complete course in ancient Greek, looking at something that far doesn't have to treat because this does not occur in the early language we see in Homer, and that is the verbal adjectives in tos and teos. We'll divide this into two videos, the first with their formation and basic meaning, and the second looking at various examples of the two constructions, impersonal and personal. So to begin with, what are these verbal nouns? Well, we've already seen, Smythe 358, that verbal nouns, verbal forms that share certain properties of nouns are called verbal nouns. There are two kinds of verbal nouns. The first kind is the substantival, and that is the infinitive, which we've talked about quite a bit. And the second type are adjectival, that is to say they are inflected like adjectives. And first off, you have the participles, active, middle, and passive, which we treated. And now we are treating B, the verbal adjectives proper, in tos, which denote possibility, such as peletos, lovable, or which have the force of the perfect passive participle, as in graptos, written from grapo. Then you have the verbal adjectives in teos, which denote necessity, as in grapteos, that must be written. So these are what we are dealing with here. Now, how are these formed? Smythe 471. Most of the verbals in tos and theos are formed by adding these suffixes to the verbal stem of the aorist passive, first or second. So we have piletos, pileteos, from the second aorist of pileo, epileten, and then others are derived that way, like pestos, pesteos, and telestos, telesteos. And then you even have something like stalatos, stalteos, from the second aorist passive of stelo, estale. And same thing with pleitos, pleiteos, from bleten, from balo. Now, you should consult Smythe 425C for the accent of compound verbals. But the other main group are derived sometimes from other stems, either present or future, as in peretos, iteon, dunatos, menetos, and these are derived from the present stems, except menetos from the future stem. So there are various ways of deriving these, but if you are familiar with your principal parts, you really won't have much trouble identifying these as such. The accent and suffix ending are a good indicator. Now, what are the meaning of these verbals? So verbals in tos, te, ton, either one, have the meaning of a perfect passive participle, as kryptos, hidden, or paideutos, educated, or two, they express possibility, as in noetos, thinkable, or haratos, visible. Now many have either signification, but some are passive only, as in poietos, done. Now you will see in the lexiconal entry which way these go, and you will also find these forms in Smythe's index of verbs noted as well. Now A. Usually passive in meaning are verbals from deponent verbs, as minetos, which means imitated, So it comes from a deponent verb, therefore it's usually passive. B, usually active in meaning, are compounds derived from transitive active verbs, but some intransitive verbs make active verbals, as reutos, from reo, flowing. Now C, many are active or passive, and others are only active. So memptos, blamed or blamable or even blaming. Pistos, trusting in, rare, but trusted most often. Apraktos, doing nothing, not done. Or plegtos, sounding. So again, one has to consult one's lexicon sometimes to figure out exactly what's going on with these forms. Now, in comparing these forms, the comparison and superlative, we see that comparison by malon or malista is common in the case of compound adjectives, adjectives with a prepositional prefix, and the verbal adjectives in tos and adjectives in itos. So, looking at these examples of our verbal adjectives in tos, malon pistos and malon horatos is more trusted, more visible. Malista noetos and malista paideutos is most or very thinkable, most or very educated. Now, it's important to realize the way neuter plurals can represent singular ideas, because we will see that this is often the case in these verbals. So the general rule here, the neuter plural is often used even in reference to a single idea or thought in order to represent it in its entirety or in its details. As one teacher of mine said, the plural of an abstract notion represents a plurality of singular events. So we can speak of ta alete, the truth, or in this example from Xenophon, but I waved my arms, for I knew how to do this. Ekeranomon de tauta ga epistamen. The tauta represents all the various motions involved in waving one's arm as a singular event in its details. And then from Plato's Apology, we have just the adverbial expression diatakeon, diatakeon. Now this comes to play in Thucydides with these predicate adjectives. A predicate adjective is often used in the neuter plural, especially with the verbal adjectives in tos and teos in Thucydides and the poets. So we have three examples here from Thucydides. Epede etoima ein anegato. When all was ready, he put out to sea. And then it was impossible to resist the Locrians. Adunata and tus locrus amunestai. And finally, they decided to make the attempt. Edoke epikerete a enai. Literally, it was decided that it was necessary to make a try. Edoke epikerete a enai. Now, the other thing you have to understand to see how these work is this notion of the dative of agent. So the general rule, with passive verbs, usually in the perfect or pluperfect, and regularly with verbal adjectives in tos and teos, the person in whose interest an action is done is put in the dative. The notion of agency does not belong to the dative, but it is a natural inference that the person interested is the agent. So I'll read that again. With passive verbs, usually in the perfect and pluperfect, and regularly with verbal adjectives in tos and teos. The person in whose interest an action is done is put in the dative. The notion of agency does not belong to the dative, but it is a natural inference that the person interested is the agent. So our first example from Demosthenes, moi kai tutois pepraktai, moi kai tutois pepraktai. This has been done for me and these men, i.e. by me and these men. Or from Thucydides, epe de autois parascusato, when they had got their preparations ready, epe de autois parascusato, literally, when it was gotten ready by them. And then from Lysias, so much have been said by me. So here we have a third person imperative. Tos auta moi eresto. Tos auta moi eresto. Let so much have been said by me. And then finally from an inscription. Let it have been decreed by the Senate. Esse pistai te boule. Esse pistai te boule. Se pisdo is to plant your pebble into the ballot box. Now this comes to impinge on the grammar of verbal adjectives. The dative of agent is common with verbal adjectives in tos and teos. So, first example from Demosthenes, we at least must struggle to defend our freedom. Hemin gupertes eleuterias agonisteon. Hemin dupertes eleuterias agonisteon. Now, agonisto is to fight or to struggle or to contest. So, it is necessary to contest. It is necessary for us to contest regarding or on behalf of our freedom. Tes eleuterias. Or from Xenophon, envied by those at home. Tois oikoi delotos. And here we see the substantivo power of tois, because it's followed by oikoi, the locative. By those at home, delotos. He's envied by those at home. Now it's very often that este enai is omitted. So the omission of the copula, este enai, is common with verbal adjectives in tos and teos. So we have therapeuteon tous theus. The gods must be served, where este is not expressed. Now, we end up, and in this next video, we'll look at these, that 2150 of Smythe. Verbal adjectives from transitive verbs take the personal construction when the subject is emphasized, but the impersonal construction when the emphasis falls on the verbal adjective itself. Verbal adjectives from intransitive verbs, that is, such as are followed by the genitive or dative, take only the impersonal construction. Now that's a little hard to unpack, but the main thing we're moving towards is that you have these two different constructions, personal and impersonal, and these we'll look into more closely with numerous examples in the second part of this explication. Now, you have rarely the oblique cases of the verbal adjectives. And what I mean by that is usually your verbal adjective will be in the nominative, but rarely will it be in the genitive or the dative. But here you have an example from Demosthenes. concerning what must be done. Peri men dein ton hemen prakteon. And so the preposition pere needs to be followed by the genitive, and he makes the object of the preposition this verbal ton hemen prakteon, concerning what must be done by us. You will consider this among yourselves at a later time, if you are prudent. Kath humas altus husteron bu lauseste an sophronete. And an, of course, is aeon, if you are prudent. So again, what we've been looking at here are our verbal nouns and the verbal nouns to be, which are actually verbal adjectives in tos, denoting possibility, as piletos, lovable, or having the force of a perfect passive participle, graptos, written, or, most importantly and significantly, those in teos, which denote necessity, as in grapteos. And in the video that follows this, we'll be looking more closely at the impersonal and personal construction, the syntax of these verbal adjectives denoting necessity. Okay, so this picture is from a very small museum that you will find in Sparti, the town site near ancient Sparta, which, the Justus Thucydides predicted the remains are quite insignificant of Sparta. But nevertheless, there is this very nice little museum. And these are votive masks, that is, masks that would have been used at religious sites for purposes that archaeologists and students of religion can only guess. Okay, have a good day, and we'll be following up with the second half of this presentation very soon. Bye-bye.